All right, welcome to Book by Book. Today we are going to be reading Jeremiah chapters 50 through 52, and so we'll be finishing up this massive book from the Hebrew Scriptures, and then next time we're together, we're going to try to tackle Lamentations all in one session. It's a heavy book. It's an emotional book, but it is Jeremiah's response after the fall of Jerusalem. And so we are this week. Most of our text is going to be focused on the woe to the nation of Babylon, and Jeremiah 1 opened with the prophet's call and his commissioning to be a prophet to the nations, and the warning of the invader from the north that's coming. And that invader from the north is Babylon. And so now, as we are coming to the end, we're actually going to see that there will be another invader from the north that is going to actually take over Babylon. And so the warning to the nation that conquered the people of Israel and Judah is that they too will experience judgment for their wickedness, their violence, and even though they were used by God as a tool to bring discipline to the people of Israel, they are not exempt from the judgment that is coming their way. And so in these two chapters, we see this overthrow that is coming, and the indication of the coming nation that's going to take over. And the fall of the nation of Babylon happened in 539, when the Persians came with an alliance of smaller nations. So it's often called the Persians and the Medes. The Persians and their alliance came and defeated Babylon, and they were pretty smart in the way that they did it. They basically went after the priest who felt like their God was being overlooked, and made an alliance with the Babylonian priest, and were able to work their way into power in that way. And so it's pretty cunning plan that the Persians executed on Babylon. But Jeremiah is writing all of this well before those events happened. And so we're told in the we're told in chapter 51 that this happened in the fourth year of Zedekiah's reign. And so this was before the nation of Judah had been completely conquered. And so there's a lot of time that is still to come where there's some uncertainty. But even when there is uncertainty in the machinations of nations, we can trust that the Lord is sovereign over all of those. And so there's a lot of text that we're going to read, and I'm going to read in large chunks, and it will have some consistent themes throughout. So I'm not going to be go through every single word in here and dive deep, because the basic theme is Babylon will fall. So chapter 50, starting in verse 1. This is the word the Lord spoke through Jeremiah the prophet concerning Babylon and the land of the Babylonians. Announce and proclaim among the nations, lift up a banner and proclaim it, keep nothing back. But say, Babylon will be captured, Bel will be put to shame, Marduk filled with terror, her images will be put to shame, and her idols filled with terror. A nation from the north will attack her and lay waste her land, no one will live in it. Both people and animals will flee away. In those days, at that time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah together will go in tears to seek the Lord their God. They will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces toward it. They will come and bind themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains. They wandered over the mountain and hill and forgot their own resting place. Whoever found them devoured them. Their enemies said, "We are not guilty, for they sinned against the Lord, their verdant pasture. The Lord, the hope of their ancestors, flee out of Babylon, leave, leave the land of the Babylonians, and be like the goats that lead the flock. For I will stir up and bring against Babylon an alliance of great nations from the land of the north. They will take up their positions against her, and from the north she will be captured. Their arrows will be like skilled warriors who do not return empty-handed. So Babylonia will be plundered. All who plunder her will have their fill, declares the Lord." All right, so this as the last of the oracles against the nations from the prophet Jeremiah. He is essentially saving the bulk of his warnings for the biggest threat to the world at the time, and the some of the interesting things from this section, as he's calling out the fall of Babylon, when Cyrus would eventually come and conquer this region, but the calling out of Bel and Marduk, these are the main gods of the Babylonian pantheon. And so Bel was the supreme god, and then Marduk was the patron deity of Babylon after. So Bel was first, and then Marduk kind of rose into supremacy, but both were kind of going back and forth in popularity. And so so calling them both out here is, the Lord saying, like, neither of these gods, your ancient god or your more recent relevant god, is going to be able to rescue you. And so the Bel and Marduk themselves are going to be carried away, and to defeat the god of a nation or a city-state is essentially to declare complete victory. And one of the things that we should keep in mind is, as we look at all of the discipline that comes against the people of Judah and Jerusalem, is that Yahweh was never defeated. He was using these other nations to bring his discipline against the people of Israel, but he never lost. And even when we eventually look at the book of Ezekiel, we'll see that Yahweh was not defeated by the Babylonians, but Ezekiel has a vision of Yahweh leaving. And so that's one of the distinctions here as for the people of Israel and the Jewish people, is how they look at their relationship with Yahweh. He's never been defeated, but he departed from them because of their own idolatry and their own wickedness. And so even in this moment, as Babylon is proclaimed that they're going to fall, the people of Israel in verses 4-7, they start to seek the Lord and turn their eyes back to Jerusalem and to repent and to cry out to him. And then there's this invitation into a new covenant with Yahweh after they have repented of their sins and recognized their need for the Lord. And so this overthrow of Babylon is going to be the signal to them to come back to the Lord. And so the command here to flee out of Babylon is to the people of the Jewish people to get out, to be like the goats that lead the flock, and so be the ones to leave first from Babylon and the coming destruction. So I'm going to keep going. Verse 11 says, "Because you rejoice and are glad, you who pillage my inheritance, because you frolic like a heifer threshing grain and neigh like stallions, your mother will be greatly ashamed. She who gave you birth will be disgraced. She will be the least of the nations, a wilderness, a dry land, a desert. Because of the Lord's anger, she will not be inhabited, but will be completely desolate. All who pass by Babylon will be appalled. They will scoff because of all her wounds. Take up your positions around Babylon, all you who draw the bow. Shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she has sinned against the Lord. Shout against her on every side. She surrenders, her towers fall, her walls are torn down. Since this is the vengeance of the Lord, take vengeance on her. Do to her as she has done to others. Cut off from Babylon the sower and the reaper with the sickle at harvest, because of the sword of the oppressor. Let everyone return to their own people. Let everyone flee to their own land. Israel is a scattered flock that lions have chased away. The first to devour them was the king of Assyria. The last to crush their bones was Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And so here the Lord is speaking, because you rejoice and are glad. The you there is the nation of Babylon. And so saying, because you have been so joyful in the destruction of others, and in particular the people, the land of the Jews, all of this is going to come against you. And even the way that the Lord talks about Babylon, all who pass by Babylon will be appalled. And this is part of the way that the oracles against Jerusalem we're talking about, like, you will be a byword and a muttering of people. Can you believe what happened to Jerusalem? That's the same kind of language now that is coming to Babylon. And so the destruction is like, fire all the arrows for this alliance of nations from the north. Fire all the arrows, tear down the walls, and completely destroy the power of Babylon. And the walls of Babylon are particularly interesting because they were 12 feet thick. They were big walls. And so to tear down the walls and destroy the walls in that way would have been a tremendous feat. And that's one of the reasons why the people of Babylon thought, yeah, we're good, we're safe in here. But even the 12-foot walls, 12-foot wide walls were not enough to protect them from the coming destruction. But then we also get a note here that Israel is a scattered flock. And so not just talking about Judah, but all of Israel. And the first time they were scattered, as it says here, was when Assyria came and took the northern kingdom and advanced against Jerusalem as well. But the Lord turned them away, repelled them. But now Nebuchadnezzar has come, and he's the last to crush their bones, as it says here. Verse 18 says, "Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land as I punished the king of Assyria. But I will bring Israel back to their own pastures, and they will graze on Carmel and Bashan. Their appetite will be satisfied in the hills of Ephraim and Gilead. In those days, at that time, declares the Lord, search will be made for Israel's guilt, but there will be none. And for the sins of Judah, but none will be found. For I will forgive the remnant I spare." And so this rise and fall of empires is something to note here, as that Assyria fell and they were brought down by the Babylonians. And so now the Babylonians are going to have the same kind of fate that Assyria experienced, and ultimately from the Persians and the Medes that will come against them. But when this happens, the Lord is going to bring the people back. And when they come back, the sins that brought the people into exile will be forgiven. None will be found. And the remnant that has been carried off into exile in in Babylon, this exile has been a kind of redeeming and purative experience for them, as they have been, basically suffering because of their sins. And so they will come back renewed and transformed. All right, verse 21 through 32. "Attack the land of Merathaim and those who live in Pekod. Pursue, kill, and completely destroy them, declares the Lord. Do everything I have commanded you. The noise of battle is in the land, the noise of great destruction. How broken and shattered is the hammer of the whole earth. How desolate is Babylon among the nations. I set a trap for you, Babylon, and you were caught before you knew it. You were found and captured. because you opposed the Lord. The Lord has opened his arsenal and brought out the weapons of his wrath, for the sovereign Lord Almighty has work to do in the land of the Babylonians. Come against her from afar, break open her granaries, pile her up like heaps of grain, completely destroy her, and leave her no remnant. Kill all her young bulls, let them go down to the slaughter. Woe to them, for their day has come. The day has come. The time for them will be punished. Listen to the fugitives and refugees from Babylon declaring in Zion, how the Lord our God has taken vengeance for his temple. Summon archers against Babylon, all those who draw the bow, and camp all around her. Let no one escape. Repay her for her deeds. Do to her as she has done, for she has defied the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. Therefore her young men will fall in the streets. All her soldiers will be silenced in that day, declares the Lord. See, I am against you, you arrogant one, declares the Lord Almighty. For your day has come, the time for you to be punished. The arrogant one will stumble and fall, and no one will help her up. I will kindle a fire in her towns that will consume all who are around her. So it starts by talking about these two regions, Merathaim and Pekod, and these are places that were they're kind of wordplay for the region, and so it's based on Akkadian terms. Maratum was used for the marshy area in the south where the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, merge, and Pekod is an Akkadian term. There's also a synonym for Babylon, but it is employing a pun with the Hebrew word pakad, which means punish. And so the Lord is punishing Babylon, which is so playing a little word pun on the another name for the nation of Babylon. And so this rebellion, this punishment, this visitation from the Lord is not going to go well for Babylon. And we see here some of the interesting things. The Lord has used Babylon to bring his punishment as a hammer, and now the hammer itself is going to be destroyed. And so Babylon, unbeknownst to them, they were God's weapon, but now the Lord is opening up a whole arsenal that's going to be used against the nation of Babylon. And the thing that keeps coming up again and again in this phrase is that Babylon is the arrogant one. And one of the things to remember in the narrative of Scripture is Babel, the Tower of Babel, was built in what is probably the city of Babylon, that same region, and probably the same city. And so for the Lord to be saying, you are the arrogant ones, that was the sin of Babel. They wanted to build a tower to reach to the heavens. And so this is an expression of human arrogance to try to reach God, to potentially become like God. And so the ancient arrogance of Babylon is still a part of the nation, and now the punishment against that arrogance is coming about. And even while they were being used by the Lord to bring punishment to the people, or discipline to the people of Israel, they were still arrogant and thinking it was all about them. And so the Lord is calling out their arrogance throughout. And again, the people of Zion, listen to the fugitives and refugees from Babylon declaring in Zion how the Lord our God has taken vengeance for his temple. And so the temple was destroyed. And we'll read about that in the last chapter of Jeremiah. There's an accounting of how the city was taken. And so part of the Lord is taking vengeance on the temple that they destroyed. Verse 33 through 40 says, "This is what the Lord Almighty says. The people of Israel are oppressed, and the people of Judah as well. All their captors hold them fast, refusing to let them go. Yet their Redeemer is strong. The Lord Almighty is his name. He will vigorously defend their cause so that he may bring rest to their land, but unrest to those who live in Babylon. A sword against the Babylonians, declares the Lord, against those who live in Babylon, and against her officials and wise men. A sword against her false prophets. They will become fools. A sword against her warriors. They will be filled with terror. A sword against her horses and chariots, and the foreigners in her ranks. They will become weaklings. A sword against her treasures. They will be plundered. A drought on her waters. They will dry up, for it is the land of idols. Idols that will go mad with terror. So desert creatures and hyenas will live there, and there the owl will dwell. It will never again be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. As I overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah along with their neighboring towns, declares the Lord, so no one will live there. No people will dwell in it. So the destruction of Babylon will be severe. The wise will become fools. The false prophets will become fools as well. Those soldiers will be afraid. All of the treasures will be plundered. Their water itself will be dried up. And that's a significant warning, because the Babylon is where it's built because of the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, coming together. It's a very fertile region, and to lose water is going to be bad for them. And so the outcome of all of this is even their idols will go mad with terror. And if we think about the idols, like if they're just statues, what's going mad here? And so if there is a spiritual component to these idols, some kind of a supernatural being that is motivating the worship of these idols, those supernatural beings as well will go mad with terror. And so the city itself will become a wasteland, is what the 39 through 40 are talking about, the same way that Sodom and Gomorrah were wastelands. One of the things to keep in mind as well, we'll read about in Ezekiel, the sin of Sodom that led the Lord to bring destruction was their mistreatment of the poor and the marginalized, is what Ezekiel tells us. And so here we have another reference back to that, and the manifestation of their mistreatment of the poor and the marginalized was the attempted sexual assault of the two visitors that Lot was hosting, that turned out to be angels and blinded the men of Sodom. But it was fundamentally their thinking that they were superior to everybody else, so that they could treat the poor and the marginalized as less than human, and that is arrogance. And so that same sin is in Babylon, and so the same sin will lead to the same outcomes as Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's pick up in verse 41. Look, an army is coming from the north, a great nation, and many kings are being stirred up from the ends of the earth. They are armed with bows and spears. They are cruel without mercy. They sound like the roaring seas as they ride on their horses. They come like men in battle formation to attack you, daughter Babylon. The king of Babylon has heard reports about them, and his hands hang limp. Anguish has gripped him, pain like that of a woman in labor. Like a lion coming up from the Jordan's thickets to a rich pasture land, I will chase Babylon from its lands in an instant. Who is the chosen one I will appoint for this? Who is like me, and who can challenge me? And what shepherd can stand against me? Therefore, hear what the Lord has planned against Babylon, what he has purposed against the land of the Babylonians. The young of the flock will be dragged away. The pasture will be appalled at their fate. At the sound of Babylon's capture, the earth will tremble. Its cry will resound among the nations. So there's this warning. Look, all of these forces are coming against us, coming against the city of Babylon. And there's a picture here that, Jeremiah is giving this oracle, decades before the actual fall of Babylon. But he's giving the picture as a way that is in the present tense. And this is one of the elements of the divine perspective of history, is the Lord's showing Jeremiah what will happen in a way that so he reports it back to the people to say this is as good as has happened. Like it is already basically done. That Babylon will fall, and the army from the north will overwhelm them. And yeah, so it continues on with the same kind of destruction messages. But if we think about when this happened, if this message is being given during Zedekiah's reign, the Jeremiah never says exactly when it's going to happen, but the people thought that Jeremiah was pro-Babylon, and that's one of the reasons why he was arrested in the first place. But he's also, if he's giving this oracle during that same time frame, they're just not paying attention. He's pro-Yahweh. He's pro the Lord, and so he recognizes that God is the one who raises and lowers empires, and Babylon is just another one of those empires. And so the Lord is going to bring about that destruction on those nations, the same way he did Assyria, Egypt, and now focus on Babylon. So let's look at chapter 51, and we will start 1 through 14, continuing on with oracle against Babylon. This is what the Lord says. See, I will stir up in the spirit of a destroyer against Babylon and the people of Leb-Kamai. I will send foreigners to Babylon to winnow her and to devastate her land. They will oppose her on every side in the day of her disaster. Let not the archer string his bow, nor let him put on his armor. Do not spare her young men. Completely destroy her army. They will fall down slain in Babylon, fatally wounded in her streets. For Israel and Judah have not been forsaken by their God, the Lord Almighty, though their land is full of guilt before the Holy One of Israel. Flee from Babylon. Run for your lives. Do not be destroyed because of her sins. It is time for the Lord's vengeance. He will repay her what she deserves. Babylon was a gold cup in the Lord's hands. She made the whole earth drunk. The nations drank her wine. Therefore, they have now gone mad. Babylon will suddenly fall and be broken. Wail over her. Get balm for her pain. Perhaps she can be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she cannot be healed. Let us leave her and each go to our own land. For her judgment reaches to the skies. It rises as high as the heavens. The Lord has vindicated us. Come, let us tell in Zion what the Lord our God has done. So verses 9 through 10, those are like probably exiles speaking. So from this oracle. Verse 11, sharpen the arrows, take up the shields. The Lord has stirred up the kings of the Medes because his purpose is to destroy Babylon. The Lord will take vengeance for his temple. Lift up a banner against the walls of Babylon. Reinforce the guard. Station the watchmen. Prepare an ambush. The Lord will carry out his purpose, his decree against the people of Babylon. You who live by many waters and are rich in treasures, your end has come, the time for you to be destroyed. The Lord Almighty has sworn by himself, I will surely fill you with troops as with a swarm of locusts, and they will shout in triumph over you. All right, so more of the same kind of messaging about the fall of Babylon that is coming. But one of the things that's interesting is in verse 1, Leb-Kamai is a phrase here against Babylon and the people of Leb-Kamai. Leb-Kamai is what is known as an atbash. And this is, I'm going to read a quote here. This is a literary device which exchanges the letters of the intended word with corresponding letters counted from the other end of the alphabet. And so another one is in Jeremiah 25 through 26, where Babylon is replaced by Shishak. And in English, this would require replacing A with Z, B with Y, C with X. So New York might be referred to as New Blip. In this passage, the name Chaldea is masked by using the consonants LBQMY, Leb-Kamai, for KSDYM, which was Chaldeum. And so possibly this was done because of the dangers involved in speaking the name of the enemy, but more likely it is a form of taunting. And so So if you're reading through, like, you're like, what is Leb Kamai? Where's this coming from? It is a literary. It's a play on the names, and so there are times where the prophets will use this tool for their own safety. And so this destroyer is coming against Babylon and Leb Kamai. So you could also look at it as like coming or going. Either way, you look at Babylon, the destroyer is coming, and it will bring down all of the people and the nations. And so the the exiles are, called to leave, to flee, and to get out. But there's an interesting note here in verse 7. It describes Babylon as a gold cup in the Lord's hand, and this is acknowledges that God used Babylon for His own purposes, but also the Babylonians took all of the cups and the elements of worship. They took it all from the temple, and so that Jeremiah may have known that because that already happened. And so even that cup that they think, look at all the power we have, the Lord is still dictating the terms of their power. And so, yeah. Again, the nation is referred to as those who live by many waters, and the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers are there. And the many waters could have been the canals that were drawn off of those rivers to irrigate the land around. And so the many waters there is referring to the whole water system that has been used, that has been such a blessing for so long for all these people. And the Lord is saying, these things that you've taken for granted, they can't even provide for you anymore. And so, a continued message of destruction and woe for the nation. Verse 15 through 19. He made the earth by His power. He founded the world by His wisdom and stretched out the heavens by His understanding. The Lord did all these things. When He thunders, the waters in heavens roar. He makes clouds rise from the ends of the earth. He sends lightning with rain and brings out the wind from its storehouses. Everyone is senseless and without knowledge. Every goldsmith is shamed by his idols. The images he makes are a fraud. They have no breath in them. They are worthless, the objects of mockery. When their judgment comes, they will perish. He who is the portion of Jacob is not like these, for He is the maker of all things, including the people of His inheritance. The Lord Almighty is His name. So the contrast here that is being set up is the Lord who created everything and orchestrates the weather systems and the powers of the earth and the sky and the sea. He is bringing this judgment against Babylon. And so this massive, powerful God is contrasted to the idols of the Babylonians. And earlier we talked about how their idols will go mad. So even the spiritual forces that are around and behind these idols, they're crazy. They've lost their mind. And now these statues are just worthless nothing. They have no power. They cannot save. But the Lord, who is the portion of Jacob, is not like these. And so He still has power, and He will use His power as He brings Babylon to their destruction. Let's look at verses 20 through 26. You are my war club, my weapon for battle, talking about Babylon. With you I shatter nations. With you I destroy kingdoms. With you I shatter horse and rider. With you I shatter chariot and driver. With you I shatter man and woman. With you I shatter old man and youth. With you I shatter young man and young woman. With you I shatter shepherd and flock. With you I shatter farmer and oxen. With you I shatter governors and officials. Before your eyes I will repay Babylon and all who live in Babylonia for all the wrong they have done in Zion, declares the Lord. I am against you, you destroying mountain, you who destroy the whole earth, declares the Lord. I will stretch out my hand against you, roll you off the cliffs, and make you a burned out mountain. No rock will be taken from you for a cornerstone, nor any stone for a foundation, for you will be desolate forever, declares the Lord. So now this tool that the Lord used to do his work, he is casting aside. And so he will no longer use them to do these things. And he calls them a destroying, burned out mountain. And there are no volcanoes in the region of Babylon, so probably isn't necessarily talking about a volcano. So it's probably a metaphor for like being like higher than all the other nations in prestige, like a mountain of security and strength. And then imagine that's all gone and destroyed. And so that's what the Lord is saying will happen to Babylon. So not necessarily a volcano that would come and destroy Babylon, but just a word picture of it, a mountain that has been taken away. Now, you may think that sounds awfully familiar. It does, because Jesus talked to his disciples about the temple mountain in Matthew, which we looked at just a few weeks ago on Sunday. And he says, if you pray about to remove this mountain, because the temple at the time the temple system had lost its authority and willingness to follow the Lord closely. And so the Lord is saying you can take this mountain and throw it in the sea. And so the similar kind of fate here in Babylon. All right, let's keep going. Verses 27 through 32. Lift up a banner in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations for battle against her, summon against her these kingdoms, Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. Appoint a commander against her, send up horses like a swarm of locusts, prepare the nation for battle against her, the kings of the Medes, their governors, and all their officials, and all the countries they rule. The land trembles and writhes, for the Lord's purposes against Babylon stand, to lay waste the land of Babylon, so that no one will live there. Babylon's warriors have stopped fighting. They remain in their strongholds. Their strength is exhausted. They have become weaklings. Her dwellings are set on fire. The bars of her gates are broken. One courier follows another, and messenger follows messenger, to announce to the king of Babylon that his entire city is captured, the river crossing seized, the marshes set on fire, and the soldiers are terrified. So yeah, it's not a good scene for Babylon. And so here we get these pictures of these northern nations, Ararat, Mini, Ashkenaz, the Medes. All of these are part of that coalition that are going to come with the Persians to fight against Babylon. And we will see that they have lost their will to fight, their will to endure, and they will fall. And even the land that they has been such a blessing. Like having marshes and it was nice. It was refreshing. It was not a bad thing. But if the marshes around your city are on fire, there's nowhere for you to go. And so this is not a good scene. All the rivers are seized, and this is actually part of how they ultimately did defeat the Babylonian armies. They just cut them off from all possible escapes. So. Verses 33 through 35 says this. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Daughter Babylon is like a threshing floor. At the time it is trampled, the time to harvest her will soon come. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has devoured us. He has thrown us into confusion. He has made us an empty jar. Like a serpent, he has swallowed us and filled his stomach with our delicacies, and then he spewed us out. May the violence done to our flesh be on Babylon. May the inhabitants of Zion may our blood be on those who live in Babylonia, says Jerusalem. So Nebuchadnezzar thought he could just gobble up everything along the way with no consequences and only more glory for himself. But here, Babylon is like a threshing floor. And so the oxen all the grain would be placed out, and the oxen would actually kind of stomp on stuff and separate the grain from the chaff. And so that is what is being pictured for Babylon's future, just being stomped and trampled upon in the process of sorting the nation. Verse 36 through 44. Therefore, this is what the Lord says. See, I will defend your cause and avenge you. This is the Lord talking to the remnant. avenge you. I will dry up her sea, Babylon's sea, and make her springs dry. Babylon will be a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, an object of horror and scorn, a place where no one lives. Her people all roar like young lions. They growl like lion cubs. But while they are aroused, I will set out a feast for them and make them drunk. So they will shout with laughter, then sleep forever and not awake, declares the Lord. I will bring them down like lambs to the slaughter, like rams and goats. How Shishak will be captured, the boasts of the whole earth seized, how desolate Babylon will be among the nations. The sea will rise over Babylon, its roaring waves will cover her, her towns will be desolate, a dry and desert land, a land where no one lives, through which no one travels. I will punish Bel in Babylon and make him spew out what he has swallowed. The nations will no longer stream to him, and the wall of Babylon will fall. And so this destruction will desolate the whole region, and it'll be like jackals come where there's dead animals, like they're not hunters, and so they're scavenger animals, and so the nation will just be a place for the scavengers. And while they're roaring like Simba in the Lion King, thinking they're big and tough, they're not. And so the Lord it says, I'm going to get them so drunk on their own arrogance and pride, essentially, that when the time comes, they will not be able to defend themselves. So the Lord is bringing down the nation that has been so powerful, and even creation itself. The sea will overtake the nation and the city of Babylon, and that's metaphorical. Like the sea wouldn't necessarily come all this way, but earlier the Lord talked about how the riders of the invading army sound on the horses sound like the roaring sea, and so that may be part of what is coming, like this roaring sea that's going to wash over the city of Babylon as it falls. All right, verses 45 through 48. This is the Lord speaking. Come out of her, my people. Run for your lives. Run from the fierce anger of the Lord. Do not lose heart or be afraid. When rumors are heard in the land, one rumor comes this year, another the next, rumors of violence in the land, and the ruler against her. Ruler, for the time will surely come when I will punish the idols of Babylon. Her whole land will be disgraced, and her slain will all lie fallen within her. Then heaven and earth and all that is in them will shout for joy over Babylon, for out of the north destroyers will attack her, declares the Lord. And so here again, the Lord is giving the warning to the exiles. There's a time coming when you should flee from the city for your safety. And so, the nation will fall. Israel will be vindicated. The rest of the earth will also celebrate that Babylon has fallen. All right, keep on keeping on here. These are long chapters, so thank you for reading with me. Verse 49, Babylon must fall because of Israel's slain, just as the slain in all the earth have fallen because of Babylon. You who have escaped the sword, leave and do not linger. Remember the Lord in a distant land and call to mind Jerusalem. We are disgraced, for we have been insulted, and shame covers our faces, because foreigners have entered the holy places of the Lord's house. But the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will punish her idols, and throughout her land the wounded will groan. Even if Babylon ascends to the heavens and fortifies her lofty stronghold, I will send destroyers against her, declares the Lord. The sound of a cry comes from Babylon, the sound of great destruction from the land of the Babylonians. The Lord will destroy Babylon. He will silence her noisy din. Waves of enemies will rage like great waters. The roars of their voices will resound. A destroyer will come against Babylon. Her warriors will be captured, and their bows will be broken. For the Lord is a God of retribution. He will repay in full. I will make her officials and wise men drunk, her governors, officials, officers, and warriors as well. They will sleep forever and not awake, declares the King, whose name is the Lord Almighty. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Babylon's thick wall will be leveled, and her high gates set on fire. The people exhaust themselves for nothing. The nation's labor is only fuel for the flames. So continued message of destruction against the people. And so I'm not going to go into all of the levels of detail there. It's kind of been covered. Verse 59, then, we get one more symbolic act here. Verse 59, this is the message Jeremiah, the prophet, gave to the staff officer, Seraiah, son of Neriah, the son of Mahaseiah, when he went to Babylon with Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 4th year of his reign. Jeremiah had written on a scroll about all the disasters that would come upon Babylon, all that had been recorded concerning Babylon. He said to Seraiah, when you get to Babylon, see that you read all these words aloud, then say, Lord, you have said you will destroy this place, so that neither people nor animals will live in it. It will be desolate forever. When you finish reading this scroll, tie a stone to it and throw it into the Euphrates. Then say, so will Babylon sink to rise no more, because of the disaster I will bring on her, and her people will fall. The words of Jeremiah end here. Whew, wow, that was a lot. So this last act here, this oracle, acted out oracle, like to throw the destruction oracle into the river and to sink, is just like a seal on this whole promise. Like, this is what is going to happen to Babylon. They will sink. And so Zedekiah was taken to Babylon in 593 BC. And so Seraiah was given these, was a part of that envoy that went to Babylon. Zedekiah would then come back and rule in Jerusalem for a few years afterwards. But yeah, so this is Jeremiah's last act or oracle in the book against the nation of Babylon ends there. So chapter 52 is the final chapter, and it really does kind of echo a lot of what we've read in 2 Kings already. And so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, since we kind of covered a lot of this material. But it talks about the final destruction of Jerusalem. And these words are not necessarily Jeremiah's words. He didn't necessarily write this. It could have been one of the editors wanted to put it in here so that we have a continuity between Jeremiah's works and the book of 2 Kings. So 52:1, Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah, not Jeremiah the prophet, a different Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. It was because of the Lord's anger that all this happened to Jerusalem and Judah, and in the end he thrust them from his presence. Now Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. They encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled. They left the city at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward the Arabah, but the Babylonian army pursued King Zedekiah and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon in Riblah and the land of Hamath, where he pronounced sentence on him. There at Riblah, the king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He also killed all the officials of Judah. Then he put out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon, where he put him in prison till the day of his death. And so we've read through that. That is almost word for word the end of 2 Kings. And yeah, so Zedekiah's last sight was his sons being killed, and then they took his eyes out, and then he was just imprisoned. But it continues on to talk about the destruction of Babylon, verses 12 through 20, or Jerusalem, verses 12 through 27. On the 10th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the commander of the imperial guard, who served the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down all the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, carried into exile some of the poorest people from those who remained in the city, along with the rest of the craftsmen and those who had deserted to the king of Babylon. But Nebuzaradan left behind the rest of the poorest people of the land to work the vineyards and fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars, these are things in the temple, the movable stands, and the bronze sea that were at the temple of the Lord, and they carried all the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and all the bronze articles used in the temple service. The commander of the imperial guard took away the basins, censers, sprinkling bowls, pots, lampstands, dishes, and bowls used for drink offerings, all that were made of pure gold or silver. The bronze from the 2 pillars, the sea, and the 12 bronze bulls under it, and the movable stands which King Solomon had made for the temple of the Lord was more than could be weighed. Each pillar was 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. Each was 4 fingers thick and hollow. The bronze capital on the top of one pillar was 5 cubits high and was decorated with a network and pomegranates of bronze all around. The other pillar with its pomegranates was similar. There were 96 pomegranates on the side. The total number of pomegranates above the surrounding network was 100. The commander of the guard took as prisoners Sariah, the chief priest, Zephaniah, the priest next in rank, and 3 doorkeepers. Of those still in the city, he took the officer in charge of the fighting men, the 7 royal advisors. He also took the secretary, who was the chief officer in charge of conscripting the people of the land, 60 of whom were found in the city. Nebuzaradan, the commander, took them all and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There at Riblah, the land of Hamath, the king had them executed. So Judah went into captivity away from her land. And so a thorough pillaging of the city, destroying the temple and the important buildings, but then also taking away all of the valuable things that were a part of the worship system in the temple. And so those cups that are referenced will later be used in Babylon when one of the kings is throwing a party and they're drinking wine for their big orgiastic party from these holy artifacts. And so the Lord at that time writes on the wall, many, many tekel parsin, you have been weighed and found wanting. And so all those things that were taken away, they got repurposed. And we also see here the Babylonians were taking some of the poorest people, some of the most influential people, and still leaving some of the people back to care for the vineyards and the different things. And so the verses 28 through 30 give us some records of the deportations. This is the number of people Nebuchadnezzar carried into exile. In the 7th year, 3,023 Jews. In Nebuchadnezzar's 18th year, 832 people from Jerusalem. In the 23rd year, 745 Jews taken into exile by Nebuzaradan, the commander of the imperial guard. There were 4,600 people in all. And so this number doesn't sound like a lot, but it could be that they are counting the important people. It could be also that they're just counting men, and so not children or women. But it is a significant amount of people that were deported in a way that the city was already weakened after years of siege. There may not have been a lot of people still in Jerusalem at this time. So the last section here. So we read all this destruction, and it can be overwhelming. But reading this section of the destruction of Jerusalem, right after reading about the promised destruction of Babylon, and there are similarities between what happened to Jerusalem that the Lord says are going to happen to Babylon in the destruction of the temples and the walls and all of the city. And so there's some parallel reading there that we should recognize, like what Babylon did to Jerusalem, the Lord is going to bring, tenfold to Babylon. But in those sections, we also are told about the restoration of the remnant. And in verse 31, we read this interesting section, the last few verses of the book of Jeremiah. In the 37th year of the exile, Jehoiakim, king of Judah, in the year Awal Marduk became king of Babylon on the 25th day of the 12th month, he released Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and freed him from prison. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat of honor higher than those of the other kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim put aside his prison clothes, and for the rest of his life ate regularly at the king's table. Day by day, the king of Babylon gave Jehoiakim a regular allowance as long as he lived until the day of his death. So Jehoiakim, who is Zedekiah's nephew, he was arrested and taken into exile earlier, and this next king, Awel Marduk, elevates him, brings him into his table. And this was something that was not uncommon in the ancient world, to have the kings that you conquered sitting, at your table, essentially as like reminders of your past victories. But the difference here, or what is noted here, is that Awel Marduk spoke kindly to Jehoiakim and gave regular allowance as long as he lived. And so even here at the end of Jeremiah, there is this little moment of restoration for a descendant of David, that the Lord is not done with his people. And in the oracle against Babylon, there's a message of remnant and restoration for the people to go back to the land, to flee from Babylon. And even here, as the book of Jeremiah is completed, we are reminded that Jehoiakim, where Zedekiah went to prison and died in prison, Jehoiakim was elevated and set aside his prison clothes. And there is a hint of a future restoration. And so we will wrap there on Jeremiah. And we did it, guys. We finished the book of Jeremiah. And next time we're together, we'll try to get through Lamentations, and then we'll take a bit of a break for the summer. And it'll be give me some time to figure out how to approach Ezekiel, which is another long book, but it's weirder than all of them. So any questions or comments on these 3 chapters of Jeremiah? No? All right. Well, cool. So while these chapters were a bit of a bummer, I hope that there was something edifying in this. If anything else, to take away that God promises a remnant and he will restore. And he ultimately does. So, but if there are any comments or questions, then let's wrap here. And so we won't be meeting next week. I will be driving home from Idaho, but we'll be back on May 1st, May Day. So y'all have a great rest of your week, and I will see you Sunday.